Now I would like to request Tulsalata Amatya, Vice President of Women NGO Federation, to formally welcome our chief guest and the distinguished guest at the dais. So I'd request the organizing team to assist her.
Rina, Dr. Vandana Shiva, globally acclaimed environmental and gender rights activist from South Asia, Justice Top Bahadur Magar, Chairperson, National Human Rights Commission, Mr. Esla Ruwan Veerakun, SAR General Secretary, Kamala Parajuli, Chairperson, National Women's Commission, Lily Thapa, Member, Human Rights Commission, Dr. Shashi Adhikari, President of NGO Federation, Lisa Shannon from Every Woman, Bonnie Carroll from TAPS International, and my Humsafar sisters in this gender rights activism from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's a matter of privilege for me to address this vibrant and august gathering. But it's also a matter of great pride for me as a South Asian. Because South Asia, with its incredibly pluralist culture, is a shining beacon to the world. South Asian pluralism is not just based on the proximity of our borders, but on our shared cultures, art, architecture, literature, cuisine, religion, ethnicity, and of course, our shared colonial history. This vibrant culture binds yet distances. It diversities which exist under pluralism. But we also share a blighting and a terribly shameful fact. In South Asia, every second woman faces violence at home or at the workplace. 44% of all child brides in the world are from South Asia. And South Asia hosts the largest number of women and girls killed overall. Not all men in South Asia practice violence against women and girls, but all women in South Asia live under the threat of male violence every day of their lives continuously. Its violence exists from the womb to the tomb. Female feticide, female infanticide, lack of access to nutrition, health, education, domestic violence, rape, sexual assault, harassment at the workplace. The list is long and horrifying. Violence could be culture-specific or region-specific, like acid throwing, honor killing, dowry, witch hunting. And to this list we can add economic violence, like skewed inheritance laws, lack of property rights, lack of social security, wage parity, gender-insensitive laws and labor laws, low levels of female labor force participation, insecure public spaces, unbalanced and unpaid care work, everything that perpetuates the culture of violence. Interestingly, violence against women kills more people than armed conflict and any other forms of escalated violence, and yet it does not catch the attention of policy makers. For example, between 2011 and 15, India recorded 40,000 dowry deaths, and this is 10 times more than the combined fatalities of the Kashmir conflict or the armed Naxalite conflict. In Nepal and Bangladesh recently, on a gender-based report, a violence report, gender-based violence is the first or the second cause of intentional homicides, much more than other ethno-communal violence. But yet, it does not catch the attention of policymakers. The reason is, deaths due to armed conflict is visible, is reported, is acknowledged, and it gets a reactive measure. Gender-based violence is invisible, unreported, and unacknowledged due to cultural pressures. Women in South Asia are vulnerable to violence as a result of multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination and inequality, which could include age, ethnicity, caste, poverty, religion, gender identity, disability, your nationality, your indigeneity, your immigration status. So it's a long list of intersecting dimensions. And surprisingly, well, not surprisingly, I would say, shamefully, South Asia also has the missing women syndrome. Rigid cultures, patriarchal attitudes, as my friend Lily indicated, devalues the role of women in South Asian societies. And the customary norms that privilege men and boys' access to opportunities and resources is the largest contributor for discriminatory attitudes that permeate family, community, society, and the nation. But to be fair, South Asian governments, in fact, for South Asian governments, violence against women is receiving much more attention now than ever before. More than 3 decades of vibrant gender activism by a vibrant women's movement in South Asia, many of whom are in this hall today, has contributed to violence against women being recognized as a health and human rights violation. In fact, with the governmental and non-governmental efforts, the SARC Convention on Prevention and Combating of Trafficking of Women and Children for Prostitution in 2002 was initiated. Almost all countries of South Asia have laws on domestic violence, child marriage, against trafficking, sexual harassment at workplace, and so on. But on the whole, have these laws and policies translated into effective action on the ground to make women safe from violence or free from violence? Well, the answer is a very mixed one. State interventions to protect women through effective implementation of legislation has been consistently impaired by the lack of support from dominant vested interests within the community who legitimize violence as normal. So perhaps this needs to be tackled. Despite punitive legislation, most women have to abide by the patriarchal social system which reinforces gender inequalities. Perhaps mindsets need to be changed. Constitutional guarantees of equality are negated by legislation based on religion and customary laws like the hudud laws in Pakistan and various personal laws in India and Sri Lanka. Perhaps this is the time to review all laws from a gender lens. And having said that, let me say, laws are just the starting point. for implementation of interventions on violence against women and girls. All implementation, as I see it, is hindered by three factors in South Asia. Sometimes lack of political will, and almost always lack of awareness and lack of resources. Let us remember, ladies and gentlemen, that we in South Asia are still bearing the economic burden of our colonial legacy. Clearly, what is being done is not enough, as the escalated numbers of violence, particularly during COVID, has indicated. And violence against women has contributed to feminization of poverty all over the world, and very evidently here in South Asia. Women are half of the world's population, and they comprise of 70% of the world's extreme poor. There are 700 million fewer women than men in paid work. Women are paid 24% less than men. In India, for example, a woman spends 6.5 hours on unpaid care work and a man spends 31 minutes. Bangladesh's garment sector, worth about $28 billion, which employs 4 million people, of which 80% are women. But 53% of these garment workers have reported spousal violence, which indicates their capacity to earn wages. Today, at this conference, the women of South Asia demand freedom from all kinds of violence and consequent empowerment, because we deserve our human rights to be respected and protected. We want freedom from violence because women account for 1/2 of a country's potential talent base, and the nation's competitiveness in the long run will depend significantly on whether and how we utilize our women for increasing the developmental potential of a nation. We claim freedom from violence because serious shift towards sustainable development requires gender equality. Half of the world's collective intelligence and capacity needs to be nurtured for future generations to come. And I am convinced, ladies and gentlemen, that the next increment of global growth will depend upon the full economic empowerment of women. But this can be done holistically and cohesively through a coordinated, strategized response involving all stakeholders: the nations, the world community, civil society organizations, the UN system, because only then can we bridge the normative, the geographical, and the implementation gaps on addressing violence against women and girls. Perhaps the time is now to think of a global binding norm that will enable rigorous, legally binding framework for every nation on earth to undertake evidence-based interventions. It is a time to think of a global norm that will catalyze an exponential increase in funding and for the world to monitor progress. A global norm that combines the best of health and human rights, that will protect, prevent, punish, and create a paradigm shift in the way we address violence against women and girls. In conclusion, I want to quote South Asia's firebrand activist Asma Jahangir. And I quote, I was privileged to work with Asma ji for many years. I quote, "You cannot have human rights in society if you do not have women's rights." By that quote, ladies and gentlemen, all countries of South Asia fall woefully short. But we can turn the clock forward. Today, as we stand in this small but incredibly vibrant country of Nepal, in the shadow of the Himalayas, I am deeply conscious of a momentous moment in history. Centuries of violence sustained as a pandemic for eons in this world is about to end. Voices of South Asian women will reverberate from this small room to the globe for a unanimous call on an effective global norm that will transform our lives today and for all the tomorrows to come. My brothers and sisters of South Asia, come, let us make history. Thank you.